Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I'm here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold. We are days away from opening day. Evan Petzold is going to be able to leave Lakeland, Florida. From what I hear, there's no outstanding warrants to prevent him from coming back to the Motor City. We have tons of things to talk about. We have a great guest tonight. But before we get into all of that, Evan Petzold, this is the week. How you doing? Let's get into it.
Yeah, we finally survived spring training, so we made it through another one of these things, believe it or not. Yeah, look, I'm finally getting a chance to leave Florida. I've been stuck down here for quite some time. Opening day is Thursday, March 28th against the Chicago White Sox at Guaranteed Rate Field. I'm making a quick pit stop at home, then driving to Chicago for the Tigers workout on Wednesday. Opening day is on Thursday. After that, it's a trip to New York for 3 games against the New York Mets, and then finally coming back home for a little bit longer with the home opener on April 5th. So a lot of good things happening, a lot of good things going on. The Tigers have been doing a ton of winning down here in spring training. 20 wins now in the Grapefruit League, which, you know what? Winning is better than losing. These games don't mean anything in the big picture, but I think everybody's going to agree. You'd rather be on the winning side than the losing side. And the Tigers have now won 20 games in the Grapefruit League.
Yeah, a lot more fun to win than to lose. Doesn't really mean too much. Let's get into the big two right away. We got a lot of things to cover today, man. So let's get into the big two. Question one of the big two, the Tigers optioned Matt Manning to AAA Toledo. These Casey Mize and Reese Olson winning the number 4 and 5 rotation spots. Were you surprised at the outcome? Let's get into the reasons. There were some very interesting things that went on with this. Give me your take. I'll give you mine.
Well, just to start with my prediction, going back to what we talked about last week, I thought it was going to be Matt Manning, Casey Mize in, Reese Olson out. I thought Matt Manning deserved it the most. I thought that Mize deserved to be out the most. But I thought that Reese Olson was going to be the odd man out for several reasons, right? I mentioned the Super 2 status, which gives him 4 arbitration years instead of the regular 3 years of arbitration. Keeping him in AAA for a few weeks could potentially save the Tigers some money in the long run, but only potentially because the Super 2 cutoff is a moving target and you don't really know until you know. That's also a long ways away, so it's probably not worth giving up wins now to save some money later. That just doesn't really make sense. So that was kind of maybe one of the things that could have played into it for me. Other reasons, though, I thought Matt Manning was the best of the 3 pitchers in camp. I also thought that Casey Mize was going to get a free pass on the roster because the Tigers need to figure out what they have in him as a former number 1 overall pick who already has more than 3 years of service time and will become a free agent after the 2026 season. So there's no time to waste with Mize, even though I thought that he had the worst spring of the group. And then I thought Matt Manning had the best spring. So therefore, I was Manning Mize in and Olson out. But I was completely wrong. Matt Manning gets optioned to AAA Toledo. Casey Mize and Reese Olson, they're going to be in the big league rotation with Tarek Skubal, Kenta Maeda, and Jack Flaherty. So I was totally wrong on that. And the Tigers went in the direction of Casey Mize and Reese Olson. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the way that Matt Manning was holding his stuff. That's something that AJ Hinch talked about. Also, the fact that he gave up 6 home runs of his 8 hits. So 8 hits, 6 of them are homers. That's not what you want to see. But again, the sample size is just so small. I like the way that Matt Manning's fastball played up. I like the way that it's finally missing bats. I like the 2 slider shapes. That's really impressive. He changed the changeup to a harder splitter that he's able to grip and rip. I really like that pitch too. So I think there are a lot of good things going for Matt Manning, but it sure seems like the Tigers kind of knocked him for maybe giving up too many home runs and then not being able to hold his stuff, which means, maintaining his velocity deeper into his innings and as he got stretched out, build-up wise. But also, I think we have to remember that maybe part of it is just Casey Mize and Reese Olson won the job, right? Maybe it's not a knock against Matt Manning and it's more of a hat tip to Casey Mize and Reese Olson because Casey Mize came in, he treated this thing like a competition from day one. And the fastball that he showed was incredible. Probably the best fastball he's ever had in his career. He's able to double up with the fastball, triple up with the fastball. We haven't seen that before. The ride on that thing is insane. In his last outing, he was able to go get 97, 98 and paint it down and away. We haven't seen that from Casey Mize. To command a fastball like that, really impressive. And then Reese Olson, the way that he's able to attack hitters, both right-handed and left-handed with different shapes, is incredible. When you talk about the slider, you talk about the changeup, and sure, the fastball is susceptible to damage, but when he locates it, he's going to be okay. He's going to be able to hang in there. So that was one of the big points that AJ Hinch had about Reese Olson was multiple shapes to multiple hitters in any count at any time. The Tigers went with Casey Mize and Reese Olson, and Matt Manning's going to have to go live in AAA Toledo as a mud hen to start the season. It was very fascinating how this thing unfolded.
All right. So before I give you my analysis of what's gone on here, first of all, before we get to that, I do want to say, who had Matt Manning going to the minors? Because the answer was, no, nobody, not a damn human being, no one. Okay? Now, which leads me to, you got a chance to talk to AJ. And AJ is always a very interesting person to listen to. Sometimes you got to read between the lines, don't you, Evan Petzold, when AJ is talking, because...
You always do. There's always a message being sent.
Okay. So what was your interpretation by what he said? And if you need a reminder, I'll read you a quote. But go ahead. Tell me what your interpretation was from listening to AJ.
How about I just read the quote for you right now?
Go ahead.
Quote, controlling damage. He did give up a lot of homers. I think when you talk about holding your stuff and your best shapes and your best locations and even outside the box score, those are things that we looked into, end quote. He had also talked about, again, controlling damage a little bit better, holding the stuff. That was kind of the big point. He mentioned that in another quote as well. So yeah, that's ultimately what it comes down to. Like, again, this was a guy who pitched very well, but 6 of 8 hits allowed were for home runs. And then also the fact, too, that sure, he was able to tweak his mechanics to get the most out of his fastball. Fastball missed bats at an above average rate for the first time since his minor league years. And a better fastball, therefore, led to better results with sliders, changeups, curveballs. But let's not forget, Matt Manning's fastball, it averaged 95.5 miles an hour in his first start. And by his last start, it averaged 94.3 miles an hour. We were seeing more 92, 93, a little bit of 94, some 95 from Matt Manning, as opposed to 94, 95, 96, 97, like we saw early on. So the velocity was a little bit different. I think that's what AJ Hinch means. I also think it's about locating certain pitches in the right spot. Like, again, a lot of the home runs he's given up for damage, it was really good executed pitches. Well, he was hitting his spots, hitting his locations, and then suddenly lost it and hung a pitch. And you can't have those blips in the radar at the big league level against big league hitters. So I get it. I thought the reasoning was fine, but I don't think we can discredit what Casey Mize and Reese Olson did to win the job. I do think that was just as much a part of it as it was some of the things that they've given Matt Manning to work on in Toledo. We cannot forget about that.
How about this quote about Reese Olson? He can attack so many different game plans with so many different weapons. He gets in-zone miss. He can throw any pitch in any count. He can be unpredictable. He's really good. So I found that quote so telling, so informational. It tells you how much he trusts Reese Olson and how they want to attack hitters, the ability to be multifaceted, the ability to execute different game plans against different teams, what he saw, what he trusts. TRUSTS, trusts. Okay? That was the most telling quote I saw about all this. And what it told me was, guess who the number 4 starter is? Not the number. We were worried Reese Olson was going to get demoted, and there were tons of great reasons, and you gave a really shrewd one. But Reese Olson, I guess, was always on the team. He's probably ahead of Casey Mize. Look, Casey Mize's stuff looks really, really good. Especially
the secondary stuff is questionable.
Let me finish, because that's exactly what I was going to get to. Look, pre-TJ, Casey Mize had a damn good slider. He used to have a cutter. He doesn't even throw it anymore, which was kind of like a faster version of his slider. He used to mix in a curveball, None of those secondaries whatsoever has he really commanded at all this spring. Yet, he gets outs. And the two things I can tell you about Mize and Olson are they do what major league pitchers have to do, which is when they miss, they don't miss over the plate. They miss outside of the plate. You know, it's funny. I went back and looked at Tarek Skubal in 2022. What was the year he threw 150 innings? 2022?
2021.
2021. And I went back and looked at right when, it's some stretch in that 2021 year, I think. He had a stretch for like 6 games where he was not very good and he was giving up homers, and Skubal does not give up homers. And all of those were because Skubal was missing a lot over the plate. And the evolution of Tarek Skubal has been he has learned how to miss not on the plate anymore. His misses are so much better than they used to be. So I think that is where they're trying to get Matt Manning to understand and to go. You can miss, but you cannot miss in the nitro zone. You have to miss off the plate with your stuff. And that is the next evolution of Matt Manning, because no pitcher this year improved more than Matt Manning.
I agree.
But Matt Manning has not learned from a tactical, strategic sense that he cannot miss over the plate. Once he masters that and understands they expect him to maintain his fastball velocity a little better than he started trending as spring wore on, he has as much or more upside than anybody besides Tarek Skubal with what he throws now. That's my take on what happened. They need to finish the polishing and the development of Matt Manning to be what he can be. This is how they're going about it.
Matt Manning has some of the best stuff that he's had in his entire professional career. Maybe the best stuff right now. Now he's got to learn how to use it. Spot on.
He's got to learn how to strategically use it. That is, it's that, look, the split change, oh man, so good. So, all right, that's kind of what happened with starting pitching. You got anything to add to this?
Nope, we got question 2 to get to.
All right. Question 2, the big 2. Slow starts have doomed the Tigers in each of A.J. Hinch's 3 seasons. After watching spring training, you think the Tigers are getting off to a better start in 2024?
Ooh, I think so. I think it's going to happen. I think this is the year where the Tigers are going to get off to a good start under A.J. Hinch. Let's go back to April of 2021, 8-19. April 2022, 7-14. March and April 2023, 10-17. That's a lot of losses and not enough wins early in the season, and it doomed the Tigers 3 years in a row where they've come up short. And sure, some of those finishes were not like other years. We saw them finish really strong in 2021. 2022 was a complete nightmare. And then 2023, a much stronger finish. But you got to get off to a better start if you want any chance at competing in the division. And I think that's going to happen to the Tigers in 2024 for 2 reasons. Playing clean and the spring training competition. I want to start with the competition. You got Matt Manning going to AAA Toledo. You have Sawyer Gipson-Long, who's going to start the season on the injured list. He's coming back from a left groin strain. He's almost fully healthy, but he's going to start the year on the injured list. He would have been in that rotation competition as well. It would have been 7 starters for 5 spots. And he probably would have been optioned to Toledo, but he would have been in that mix and pushed those guys even a little bit more. Both of those dudes are MLB caliber pitchers. You got Ryan Kreidler, Justin Henry Malloy going to Toledo. Both of those guys are MLB caliber players, especially Kreidler. Kreidler is a big leaguer. So I think being in that competition and then also watching teammates in those tight competitions, I think it has everyone a little bit more prepared for the season. So that's something that the Tigers talked about from the beginning. They talked about that early in camp, was having a really, really competitive camp from the bullpen to the starting rotation, some of the position players in the mix, and allowing that to elevate everybody's game. Even guys that are locked in, right? Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, they look over there and they see Ryan Kreidler fighting for his life. You look at Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Kenta Maeda, even the guys that made it, right? Casey Mize and Reese Olson being in that rotation battle. They're all looking at that like, oh, wow, like it's everyone's pitching well, everyone's dealing, and the margin for error is just so slim, even in spring training. Same thing with the bullpen. When you talk about Alex Fido, Joey Wentz, Bo Brisky, that group. So the fact that the margin for error is so small, even in spring training, it pushed those guys even that much more to lock into the competition. I think that's going to allow everyone to take the competition into the regular season a little bit better. And then, Mark, there's the concept of playing clean to win in the margins. It's the little things. AJ Hinch has been talking about that from day one of spring training. A perfect example was, just this past week, Tigers were working on a base running drill, running from third base to home plate on balls in the outfield, specifically to left field, running from third base to home plate, and running into the grass to make a more difficult throw for the outfielder going home. So after working on it before the game, I watched two different players implement it when scoring on back-to-back hits to left field. So it's something like that. As little as that. It's a small detail, but it goes a really long way because you're making the throw more difficult for the left fielder. It's taking the extra base on singles. We've seen Parker Meadows do that quite a bit, turning on the Jets to turn a single and do a double. It's getting good jumps from the bases and going from first base to third base on singles. It's being crisp with double play turns. Colt Keith looks solid at second base after putting in a lot of work early in camp with infield coach Joey Cora. The Tigers have spent all spring playing a clean brand of baseball from the beginning to the end. It's not like they came into camp really sloppy and now they're getting a little bit better. It's like from day one, they were playing clean. I think that says a lot about where this team is at entering the season. It's a big reason to be encouraged. It's a testament to manager AJ Hinch for having his players prepared to win in the margins. I like it. I like where this is at right now. I think that there are a lot of good things and a lot of good signs for getting off to a much better start. And I haven't even talked about the schedule.
I don't pay much attention to the schedule. Good teams never care about the schedule too much. Good teams just expect to win no matter who they play, no matter when they play them. I think I see a little more mature focus from this particular group. It's not their first go-round. You got guys going into their third, some into their fourth season. They should be ready to win. It's now or never when it comes to that stuff. And when you talk about subtle things they've been doing, I've been noticing they've been holding runners and throwing out runners trying to steal on them, which they were very weak at last year. Much better during the spring. Also, it's been an emphasis, to try to improve that also. So all I can tell you is, I'm glad the season's starting. I think they're much more prepared to win, and there's just no possible way they can tolerate getting out of the gate the way they have the last 3 years. It's time to be serious. It's time to be a serious baseball team. So,
I love that you brought up controlling the running game, Mark. That's been a big point of emphasis for them, especially last season, transitioning into this year, being able to control the running game, both pitchers and catchers. We've seen a much better showing, both of those sides, holding runners, throwing out runners, picking guys off, keeping guys close. Like I love what I'm seeing in that department as well. That's another big testament to AJ Hinch. He's been all over that with the catchers and the pitchers, working with them in tandem. And you got to love the throwing arm of Carson Kelly and Jake Rogers. Both those guys look like they're ready to sling it.
Look, last year, Jakey Rogers shockingly did not throw well. Prior to that, he was really, really good throwing the baseball. Last year, not too good. And he didn't get much help from his pitching staff. I already can see a major improvement on both those aspects of holding runners. Jake is throwing better to second. Pitchers are paying more attention to make sure they're giving him a shot at it. So, like I said, though, talk is cheap. Let's go. Time to start the season. Time to be serious about winning baseball games. And, now or never. Let's see what you got. So, all right, we have a great guest tonight. Likely the Minnesota Twins will be the Tigers' primary adversary in the AL Central and the primary obstacle to winning the AL Central. We have Twins beat writer Bobby Nightengale from the Star Tribune coming up next. But first, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be back with Bobby Nightengale.
All right. I'd like to welcome Bobby Nightengale, the Minnesota Twins beat writer for the Star Tribune, to the Days of Roar podcast. Bobby is one of the best beat writers in the business and has done a fantastic job covering the Twins since he was hired by the Star Tribune at the beginning of the 2023 season. Before covering the Twins, he covered the Cincinnati Reds for the Cincinnati Enquirer, but Bobby has shifted from the National League Central to the American League Central, and we are so thankful that he has agreed to join us on the Days of Roar podcast as we preview the 2024 season. Bobby, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start with the hard-hitting question. What was the message from Twins ownership and the front office at the beginning of the offseason, and why the heck didn't these guys spend any money this offseason to improve their roster? It seemed like they had a really good thing going last year and maybe had a real chance to build on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question for probably the whole fan base. They won their first playoff series in 2 decades. It was an 18-game playoff losing streak. So finally they got that monkey off their back. And then the first thing they said when the offseason started was for cutting payroll. And it ended up being a $30 million payroll cut. But I mean, locally, they lost their TV deal. It expired at the end of the 2023 season with Valley Sports. They're back on them on a 1-year deal. But that kind of was like the cloud over the entire organization all offseason. I mean, they didn't announce their TV deal until I think February. And so obviously they're making less money TV-wise than they were a year ago. It's on a 1-year deal. All that uncertainty, I'm sure MLB is going to try to pick them up in the future like they have with a few other teams. So that's been kind of the message. I mean, kind of the scapegoat for it all is, a TV deal that ended, but kind of frustrating for the fan base. You finally had that success in the playoffs and then boom, $30 million. So your payroll's gone and you don't really have as much depth now because of it.
So going into 2024, some subtle changes, got some rotation changes, got a few injuries, but give me a positive and a negative going into the 2024 season for the Twins.
I'd say the biggest positive is Byron Buxton's healthy and playing center field right now. That's kind of been the talk of camp. Last year, he only he used the DH, full-time DH, did not play any innings in the outfield and only ended up playing, I think, around 80 games. So the fact that he's healthy, he's running around great, looking to play center field for the first time in 2 years, that's a huge positive, offensively and defensively. Michael A. Taylor was kind of their primary center fielder last year. They lost him to free agency, but when Byron Buxton's healthy, he's one of the top 5 center fielders in the game, if not higher than that, when he's at his best. So that's been the huge positive. The biggest question mark, I think, is rotation depth. They lost Anthony DeSclafani, who was kind of a throw-in, but they didn't really add to the rotation after losing Sonny Gray, who finished second in the Cy Young voting, and losing Kenta Maeda to Detroit. So they lose 2 members of their starting rotation. That was the strength of the team last year. And it didn't really, there's no one that came in to replace it. So they have internal options, but nothing externally. And that's kind of if another starter goes down, they're really going to have to trust on, unproven guys to push them forward.
Well, you got Bailey Ober, who really started to come into his own last year, kind of an underrated type of guy, has a lot of upside. And I got a chance to watch Louis Varland the other day. Was not a great outing, but the stuff was really pretty damn good. Talk a little bit about those 2 guys. They're going to lean heavily on those 2 guys to go with Joe Ryan. Talk a little bit about the rotation, because obviously it's different. You got Pablo Lopez, without a doubt, but we'll get to Pablo in a minute. Tell us about the rest of the rotation.
Yeah, Bailey Ober, last year he pitched a career high in innings, really took a step forward. They're really happy with, he kind of turned it into like their number 3 starter by the postseason. So that was a huge step for him in terms of he was really consistent, but also logging 160 innings or 140 innings in the big leagues, plus his time in the minor leagues. So I think around 160 total. That sets him up this year where he's kind of like, don't have to worry about that. No restrictions. Don't have to use off days around him, but just really steady. He was actually throwing harder at the beginning of camp. And I remember Bryce Harper said, he said it in a TV interview. He's like, if he's throwing that hard, good luck to the rest of the Central. It's velocity's ticked down a little bit since then, kind of to where he normally is, but it's something to watch. If his velocity kicks back up, Twins kind of view that as a game changer for him. And then Louis Varland, he got hit around the other day. That was kind of his first start since he knew he was in the rotation after Anthony DeSclafani got hurt. Because otherwise he probably would have ended up in AAA just as starting depth and been the first guy up. But, his stuff is electric. Upper 90s fastball, great cutter. They moved him to the bullpen at the end of last season just because they thought it would really play well. And he ended up turning into, one of their guys they could go to in September out of the bullpen in terms of like a 7th inning guy with wipeout stuff and everything ticked up velocity-wise, strikeouts and everything else. So he gets another chance to start. something he originally voiced, like, I want to be a starter, and this is kind of his last chance to do that. So big opportunity for him in front of him. It's just a matter of, can he get through a lineup multiple times? And he's been working on a bunch of off-speed stuff. Some of it I'm sure will stick in the season. Some stuff won't. But that's the big question mark, is, can he turn over a lineup multiple times? Because first time through, he's been dominant, whether he's starter or reliever.
And then, Bobby, help me understand Joe Ryan, too. This is a guy who had a 4.51 ERA last season, but he's better than a 4.51 ERA, isn't he? What's the upside? What's the ceiling here? And how does he get there to put it all together?
Yeah, and internally, they think he could be a number 2 starter behind Pablo Lopez. And he was for the first half of last season. Then he got hurt. Initially didn't tell the team he was hurt, so he made 4 or 5 starts while injured and ended up, pitching terribly through that, went on the injured list and never really recovered after that. He's also worked on different pitch mixes. He's throwing 2 versions of a slider. He's got a 2-seam that he experiments with. But, I mean, his stuff comes down to his fastball. He has a great fastball. He just throws it a ton. Guys are going to hit a lot of homers off of it. But if he can get, secondary pitches just to put, ideas in people's minds, he could be a dominant pitcher. And that's someone, I mean, that's what you kind of have to hope for when you lose a Sonny Gray, you lose a Kent Tomata. You're going to have to hope for guys to take step forwards. And, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober especially, those two have flashed that potential in the past.
But then how about Pablo Lopez, too? Like, is there another step for him as well? I mean, he was somebody who has always been really good, but he really put it together last year with a ton of strikeouts, obviously got rewarded with, the All-Star selection, got some Cy Young votes. Like, that was really nice. But this guy had, over 230 strikeouts last year. What allowed him to take that next step? And is there another step, or is this kind of the guy that they're counting on him being moving forward? Because they really need a true number 1, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you lose Sonny Gray, and this is the guy who, I think is their most indispensable player. I mean, if he doesn't pitch well, if he gets injured, I think that has the most potential to sink the Twins season. But last year, he learned a sweeper. He got traded over from Miami for Luis Arraez, started throwing a sweeper that turned into like his best pitch, was dominant with it. Like you said, plus he was healthy, but 200 innings, 200 plus strikeouts. I mean, that's, quality stuff. In the postseason, he only gave up 1 run in 2 starts. So he's their leader in the postseason. Immediately after the season ended, Rocco Baldelli already said he's our opening day starter for next year. So, he's carried this expectations, but the way he looks at it as, I'm not learning a new pitch this year. I did an entire offseason to kind of learn how I want to be able to throw it to righties and lefties. So he thinks he can take another step. It's just a matter of being able to throw all his pitches in every count instead of, there's some pitches that work better against lefties, some that work better against righties. He worked the entire offseason saying, I want to be able to throw it to any type of hitter in every count. And, that'll be the big test for him. But he's excited that he's not learning a different pitch this year. It's just he can pick up where he left last year.
So one of the most underrated parts of the Twins' success has been how they've been able to put together, almost out of thin air in some respects, a really good bullpen. I mean, look, to me, Duran's the best closer in baseball, but he's going to start the year on the injured list. I know old Toledo Caleb Thielbar is also a pretty integral part of their bullpen. He's also injured. So tell us a little bit about when you can expect those guys back and what else they have and who's taking their place.
Yeah, they're a little banged up bullpen-wise. I mean, going into the spring training, they thought that was like bullpen depth was kind of their story. Like, that's where they added, and that's where they feel really good for the first time in a while. And, the injuries have kind of sucked the air out of that. But Duran, he has an oblique strain. He's probably going to be out, I would think, the first month of the season. Scary thing with obliques for pitchers is it can reoccur pretty easily. So I imagine they'll be cautious with him, especially front end of the season. But when he's healthy, like you said, I mean, one of the dominant closers throws 105 with 100-mile-an-hour off-speed pitches. I mean, he does things that no one else can. Thielbar, he has a hamstring strain. He was throwing today, so at a camp, he's at least throwing again. Best case scenario, he's back in probably 3 weeks. So he misses the first couple weeks of the season. And then Justin Topa was another one. They got him in the Jorge Polanco trade right before spring training started. He was a setup man for the Mariners last year. He's battling with some knee soreness, so he's going to miss the start of the season. Filling in for those guys, I mean, Griffin Jacks, he was really good in the postseason last year. Really good for most of the year, actually. Had one bad month, but other than that, was their best setup guy. Brock Stewart, he battled some injuries last year, but a guy who I think his ERA was below 2. So, I mean, a guy who was kind of lights out when he was healthy. Those are kind of be the two, I don't know which one will be the closer, but setup man closer tandem And then you have guys like Jay Jackson, who's been around a long time, journeyman who was with the Toronto Blue Jays last year, Steven Okert, who they got in a trade from Miami. So they're kind of piecing it together in the back end without some of their main guys. But Griffin Jackson, Brock Stewart will be the guys they lean on, especially with Duran and Thielbar out.
Bobby, what can you tell us about Griffin Jackson? Industry-wide, maybe a little bit slept on, but when you look at him and you see him pitch, he seems like a sneaky, really, really good reliever. What does he do well, and what kind of fits is he going to give the Tigers this year?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask the catchers in camp that, let's say Duran, his fastball, throwing 105 at his off speed, those are the best pitches in camp. But they say, like, by a wide margin after that is Griffin Jack's slider. He throws it 90 miles an hour, moves like a slider that would, that if it's 80 miles an hour, just a ton of movement, spins the ball really well, kind of like a Sonny Gray type slider. And he also throws a fastball in the upper 90s, and he has a really good curveball too. So he has like a 4 or 5 pitch mix with a slider that kind of rates top of the charts analytically, not only in terms of velocity, but movement too. So that's where he really stands out. He used to be a starter, kind of failed at that, was really good first time through, like Louis Varland, and then struggled after that. So they moved him to the bullpen, and he's been more dominant there. But playoffs, he was electric. I don't think he gave up a hit in the postseason, and then spring training this year, I don't think he's given up a run. So he's kind of carried that over.
So let's get into this real strength of the Twins. They have, arguably one of the best second, short, third base trios in all of baseball. And you could argue that they have 2 dark horse MVP candidates on the left side of their infield, and Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, both unbelievably productive, especially when both of them are healthy, which over the last few years, that's been pretty much the biggest issue with both of them. Never really truly healthy. So tell us a little bit about how they both looked early, the health issues, and, obviously the biggest part of their team.
Yeah, they're both healthy, Royce Lewis and Carlos Correa. So, combine that with Buxton, that was kind of the questions they needed to get out of camp with was, can they keep all 3 of those guys healthy? And with all 3 of them healthy, they feel like that's where they can take a big step from last year. You lose 2 members of your rotation, your pitching's probably going to take at least a small step backwards, realistically. They feel like their offense can take a big step forward if Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, those 3 are healthy. Carlos Correa dealt with plantar fasciitis for most of last year. Guys said he had trouble walking, and he still ended up playing 130 games, was really great in the postseason. So if he can get his swing back, he's moving a lot better defensively. He's still a guy that got 3 $200 million contracts in one offseason from 3 teams. So the talent's there. And then Royce Lewis, number 1 pick for a reason, been dominant every time he's played at the major league level. Just hasn't played a ton. He's, has 70 games to his name in his big league career. Says he still feels like a rookie, but always he's a really clutch hitter and really popular in Minnesota. He has that type of like face of the team type vibe. So if he can have a healthy season, if he can kind of do what he did for a full year, what he did in short samples, that's a big step. And then Edward Julian, he doesn't get as much attention just because of the guys he's around, but really good second baseman. Defensively, he's probably just below average there, but he's their leadoff hitter, gets on base a ton, doesn't chase pitches. For their lineup, he's the perfect kind of table setter in terms of a guy who doesn't have to do too much, but he hits for a lot of power and he gets on base a ton.
So he brought up Byron Buxton going back to center field, his history of injuries, especially his knees, pretty well known. How many games you think they expect him to really play out there? Somewhere between 80 and 100, I'd assume, right?
Yeah, that probably seems the most realistic. Anything over 100, I think they'd be thrilled with.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if has he ever played over 100 games in center field in a season? I can't remember if he has or not.
Yeah, he's done it once, and then I think 92 is the next highest. And he hasn't done 92 in several years. So, anything above 80 would be a bonus for them. And they always have backup plans. Like they had Michael A. Taylor last year for center field. They have Manuel Margot this year. So there's contingencies.
But Bobby, that's a real difference maker, isn't it? If these 3 guys can stay healthy for the Twins, that's a much different team and a much different offense, is it not? What's the separation between these guys healthy and these guys maybe, somewhere in the middle of healthy, not healthy? If these guys can all stay healthy, I got to imagine the Twins are going to be feeling really good.
Yeah, I mean, they think that's the kind of the key to their entire offense is if all three of those guys can stay healthy. Mark said kind of, dark horse MVP candidates with Correa and Lewis. Buxton's probably not going to play enough games to weigh into that, but probably on an individual, like per game basis, he's probably more valuable, than Royce Lewis and Carlos Correa. So, I mean, that's the key to everything. And that's kind of the way they're going to shape their lineup around those three. I mean, I think I'd expect all three of them to hit top half of the lineup, three of the top four spots.
So you have 78-year-old Carlos Santana playing first base, at least some of the time. I imagine that's going to be, in some form of rotation with Kirilloff and Santana at first, between first and DH, correct?
Yeah, I think Carlos Santana probably will see more time at first and then Kirilloff at DH just because Carlos Santana, he was a Gold Glove finalist last year in the National League. So, I mean, his defense, they really think that will kind of be a step forward in terms of Santana over Kirilloff should be able to do a lot for their infield defense.
I think he's 38 years old this year. It feels like they're lying to me about that. He feels older. It's pretty unbelievable. I mean, he actually hit for a better average last year than he has in quite a few years. And I think all Tiger fans know that Carlos Santana can definitely hit for some power when he's right. Not quite what he used to, but he's annoyed Tiger fans for quite some time. So it's to be interesting. He hasn't, I don't think he's lasted an entire season on a team in quite a few years, though. That seems to get dealt at the deadline quite a bit lately. So, but it's a good ad for solid baseball player, man. Knows how to work a count, take a walk, and play some good D now too. So yeah, it should be pretty interesting. You have some other interesting players too, right, Ev? I mean, between Jeffers and Wallner, there's other good guys that really came along for them last year.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young talent. We got to see it, right up close, playing against the Tigers. But yeah, Ryan Jeffers, Matt Wallner, Edouard Julien. Like, what's the upside for Julien? Like, what is there really to know about him? Because that's the guy who burst onto the scene. And obviously, nobody's really talking about him like they should. I think that'll change once he plays a full season. He'll start to get a little bit more recognition. But Bobby, where are the Twins at with Julien right now? And then what also should we know about guys like Ryan Jeffers and Matt Wallner, maybe the impact that they can have?
Yeah, I mean, Julien, he'll be their leadoff guy, but their best hitter all spring. I think he's on base percentage is like 500 this spring. I mean, he's been crushing the ball. So, I mean, he's just a guy, he draws a ton of walks. He doesn't swing out of pitches out of the strike zone. Kind of has a Juan Soto type profile, except obviously lesser power. He's not Juan Soto, but kind of has that kind of, a knockoff version of Juan Soto that it is huge for the top of the lineup. I mean, you don't have to ask him to do a ton when you're hitting in front of a Royce Lewis and Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton. So if you just get on base, I mean, that means better pitches to hit for the guys behind him. And he did a ton for them as a rookie. And, he's already turned into a guy that really well beloved on the team. So, I mean, he's improved his defense. They think he can improve his hitting even more this year. He was strictly a platoon guy last year. He's hoping for more chances to hit against lefties. If he can do that to even a tiny degree where he's a better option there, that does a lot for their lineup, not only against righties, but against lefties. Matt Wallner, another guy, was a rookie last year, crushed right-handed pitching, kind of in that typical corner outfield profile with a ton of power, strikes out a lot, huge arm. But Twins are excited just to see what he could do for a full season. It felt like all last year he was kind of the up and down guy, just trying to fight to stay on the roster. Now that he has left field, he's the starting guy. They're giving him the job. Should be a good opportunity for him. He gets more runway, gets a chance to relax a little bit more, and doesn't have to prove himself as much in terms of just try to stay on the big roster. Now he gets a chance to prove what he can do for an entire season. So he's excited about that. He provides a lot of thump in the middle of the order against right-handed bats. And then Max Kepler, he had a few down seasons. He was really good in 2019. Was kind of subpar ever since then until the second half of last year. And then he was probably their best hitter at the end of last season. So another corner outfielder. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and that usually motivates guys as well. So they're excited to see what Max Kepler can do. But it's like a lineup with a lot of power and guys that get on base a lot. Carlos Santana, Edouard Julien fit into that mold. So they feel like it's a well-balanced lineup.
For sure. That's really good. So you covered pretty much everything with the Twins, with us in this segment here, from the starting rotation to the bullpen to what the offense looks like, some of the upside, some of the younger players who we got to watch out for. Put everything in perspective for us, Bobby. How do you foresee the 2024 season unfolding for the Twins?
I mean, if they're healthy, I think they're the best team in the division. I think they have the highest ceiling if every team in the division stayed healthy, especially with that lineup. I mean, Byron Buxton gives them 100 games, and if Carlos Correa looks like he did it like before, and Royce Lewis is healthy, I think they could do a lot of damage offensively, and that takes a lot of pressure off their pitching staff. So, and I think their pitching staff, I mean, you lose Sonny Gray, you lose Kenta Maeda, but 1 through 5, I think matches up well with the rest of the division. I think Cleveland and Detroit are probably the two teams that are right there in the kind of the next tier right below them. But I do think the Twins, especially after coming off last year's playoff, winning a round for the first time in 2 decades, getting that monkey off their back, I feel like they feel like that's, they're ready to take the next step in terms of postseason, and they viewed themselves as the division favorites.
A lot of ifs with the offense, but that makes for a very interesting 2024 season for the Twins and pretty much every team in baseball, because there's a lot of ifs with every team. But all right, Bobby, I think that's all we have for you, but we really appreciated your time and would love to have you back at some point during the season, maybe even at the end of the season, to break down a 2-horse race for first place in the AL Central. What do you think about that?
I like it. And then also probably talk about Kenta Maeda eventually. So yeah, I'm all for it.
No doubt about it. We're already looking forward to it. Hey, thank you so much for joining. Means a ton. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out, Bobby.
Everyone, that was Bobby Nightengale, the Minnesota Twins beat writer for the Star Tribune. Mark and I have more to discuss as we preview opening day in the 2024 season. But first, let's take a break.
All right, we're back. Let's finish up what we need to discuss about the roster. There's still some competition for the last bullpen spot. We're going to talk about what we think will happen this year. So we got 4 pitchers for 2 spots. Let's be real. We got 3 pitchers for 2 spots. You got Alex Faedo, Joey Wentz, and Bo Brisky. Miguel Diaz is going to get DFA'd, and we'll see if he slips through waivers or not, because I don't think he's really in the mix there. All 3 have been really, really good. I think Bo Brisky's a lock. It's down between Faedo and Wentz. What's your thoughts?
I don't really know if Bo Brisky is a lock. I think that's kind of interesting. The way that I've had it in my roster prediction is I've had Joey Wentz in the bullpen, and I have had Bo Brisky in the bullpen from that group of 4, which, like you mentioned, is really just a group of 3. Only because I think Alex Faedo's stuff plays better as a starter. I've seen him now all spring. The changeup is pretty good. The slider obviously has been nasty, and the fastball is better than it's ever been. So when you've got a 3-pitch mix, and it tempts me. It makes me want to see what can you give me, 2 times through an order, 3 times through an order. Whereas Bo Brisky, if we're going to be honest, all he really has is the fastball and the changeup. The breaking ball, he still hasn't got a feel for it. So he's really a 2-pitch guy. Whereas, and maybe even just a 1-pitch guy if the changeup isn't consistent, where he has to be you with the fastball. Alex Faedo, he has 3 true pitches, and I'm excited to see what it looks like in longer spurts against a lineup a second time through or a third time through. But we'll see what direction the Tigers end up going. All 4 relievers have traveled to Tampa for Monday's off day before Tuesday's final spring training game against the Tampa Bay Rays at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg. Only 2 of them will get on the plane to Chicago. So the next wave of decisions, which are the final decisions, it's going to be made while the Tigers are in Tampa before they go to Chicago. Now, the final roster, it could be decided right before opening day. There's an opening day deadline to set the roster, but it seems like the Tigers really want to get their 26 players. They want to put them on the plane, and they want to take them north to Chicago. No funny business when they get up there, no bringing extra guys and then sending some back. They want their team. AJ Hinch wants to deliver his speech and then take his guys on the plane to go try to win some ball games. And that's where it's at right now. And I really respect that approach from the Tigers as opposed to holding on, waiting till the last minute. I think it's a smart way to go about it. If the Tigers are exploring the option of trading Joey Wentz, again, Joey Wentz does not have any minor league options remaining. That means that the Tigers will risk losing him to other teams through the waiver process if he doesn't make the opening day roster. But if they don't want to risk losing him, maybe they could look to trade him. I think they might be trying to sell high on Joey Wentz. And if that asking price isn't met, then maybe they just keep Joey Wentz. Because again, I do think that the stuff plays up from the left side out of the bullpen. It's good depth to have just in case Tyler Holton struggles. Or what happens if Andrew Chafin struggles? Remember, Andrew Chafin wasn't very good last year. So And Tyler Holton, yes, he was great. And I'm expecting the same performance this year, but relievers are volatile. We know that. So I think there's a lot of value in having a third lefty in that bullpen, especially somebody with multiple shapes whose fastball has played up all spring. I really like Joey Wentz in the bullpen, but the Tigers could be trying to sell high on him. We'll see about it. Again, I do think it's a toss-up between all these three. I think a lot of it depends on the ultimate decision that's made with Joey Wentz. If Joey Wentz is traded, well, then you got your two relievers in Brisky and Fido. If Wentz is not, then it's between Brisky and Fido, and then you decide who fits better. Personally, I think it's Brisky, but that might not be what the Tigers are thinking. So a lot up in the air. Look, who knows what's going to happen? By the time this podcast comes out on Monday, the decision could have already been made. We don't really know, but I would anticipate hearing more about that on Tuesday or on Wednesday leading up to Thursday's opening day.
I'll remind everybody what AJ likes to say, and you've shared with me many times. Just because you break camp with a particular roster, 2 series later, you can have 2 or 3 different guys on the roster. He doesn't look at it like, I'm breaking with these 26 and they're going to be my roster for the next 45 days.
No, but I do think there is something to be said about that as opposed to bringing all 4 relievers for 2 spots to Chicago and then making the cuts at the last possible second. I think there's something to be said about that. But you're right. And Jason Benetti mentioned this to us as well when he was on. He said he doesn't think that Scott Harris or AJ Hinch care who's on the opening day roster, which I think is true. But when you do have guys who are out of options, you have to make decisions, and you have to make those decisions within a certain time period.
Which is why I think that, they're not giving away Joey Wentz for free. I can tell you that. So at least not to start the year.
100%. And
so, it's obviously, I think maybe I spoke too soon, and I think it's probably between, Fido and Brisky. I mean, I look, Miguel Diaz has done nothing but yeoman's work for the Detroit Tigers in his couple of years of being here. He just always seems to be, the 9th guy on an 8-man pitching staff, on an 8-man reliever staff all the time. So sorry about that, Miguel, but it's same situation, different year. So, all right, let's get into a little bit to, some things like season predictions and where you think the teams really improve themselves. And maybe I have a little data to back up some of that. But tell me what you think the season's looking like for you. You got a win prediction. I always hate doing these because it's just crazy to do them right now. But what do you think for wins?
So I took about maybe 5 seconds in figuring out what my win total was going to be because, again, it absolutely does not matter. But I'm going to have to do it. Freak.com, there's going to be a prediction story that's going to come out with a bunch of different predictions from a bunch of different writers on our staff. And so this is the record that I'm going to stick with. I'm going to hold to this. 83-79, second place in the American League Central. A winning record, an improvement from last season, but still not enough to get into the playoffs. One piece away, and that piece, Alex Bregman. I said that from the beginning. I'm going to say it again. I think that would be pretty high up there on the wish list for the Tigers next offseason is to go get Alex Bregman to play third base. I think they're going to find out that they're going to be one piece away, and they might need to go make that move. We'll see. But that's my prediction.
All right. So, noted pessimist, Al Avila, guillotine critic, Mark Gorash, never has anything really nice to say about the Tigers' win total. This year, shockingly, I am going to go out on a limb, say something crazy, and tell you I think they are going to win 88 baseball games.
Get out of here.
88-74. And they are going to, at worst, make the wild card. How about that?
Are they winning the playoff series?
Yeah, I would never even speculate upon that. I worry about the closer job. That's the one part about the team I'm worried about. We'll get into the hitting in a second, but I just like the entire vibe of where we're at, of where the team's at, of the pitching. I think Meadows is going to really help them in center field. I'll give you a little stat about how much WAR they earned in center field last year, so he better be pretty good. And, I think they have a great chance to win the AL Central. I think the Twins have a huge, huge issue with all kinds of pitching depth. They don't have enough starting pitching if they get injuries. And, their bullpen is always they got a lot of strange guys in there after Duran. And so they got a lot of hitting, though. A lot of hitting. but, pitching still wins games. So do I think they can win the Central? I would say if they win 88 games, they win the Central. That's what I'll say.
I would agree with you in that sense too. And I hope that my 83 win prediction isn't a knock on what's going on. Like, there are a lot of good things going in the right direction. The vibes are real. They're really good. I like the fact that they've kept the core of the position player group pretty much intact, aside from Gio Urshela and then adding Cole Keith to the mix. A lot of those guys are returners. They know how AJ Hinch likes to use them. He loves the chess match. He loves the plug and play. Guys like Andy Ibanez and Zach McKinstry, they know how they're going to be used this year. They're prepared for those moments. They're prepared for those situations, regardless of what it is. Parker Meadows, if he's not starting, he's going to come in off the bench and he's going to be ready for his moment. Same thing with Kerry Carpenter. If they're facing a tough lefty and Kerry's on the bench and a righty comes in, he's going to be ready to step up and have a pinch hit at bat. He's going to be locked in and dialed in the whole game because he knows even if you're not starting, you're still going to play. Same thing for Ibanez, same thing for McKinstry, same thing for guys like Urshela and Matt Vierling. Just because you don't start doesn't mean you're not going to play. AJ made that very apparent last year, and I think guys have really picked up on it. That's a big reason why I think they have a real chance to do something, is because this system is in place now for the second year in a row. Guys are used to their roles. They know what their roles are. They know how to execute it. And the pitching's really good. So, yeah, there are a lot of good vibes with this team right now. And that's not even talking about the chemistry, which has been great in camp, as it was at the end of last season. So a lot of good things moving in the right direction. And if your win total is correct, Mark, I think you're spot on. They're going to win the Central. I don't think that you miss out on winning the division with that kind of a win total.
So I want to sneak in a little question for you. I call this Petzold strategy because it's the stuff that people want to know sometimes what you and I talk about when we're not doing a podcast. So I'm going to refer to this as Petzold strategy. So where do you think, look, you need 40 WAR to get to 90 wins, right? So where do you think they've improved their team where they were really lacking last year? What places have they shored up that they were weak at? There's one real obvious one, but this is what you do. This is how you like to analyze things, and so do I. So share with me a couple places where you think they've really improved their baseball team.
Well, I think that's a lot, and pretty dependent on what happens with Cole Keith at second base. I really do. I think that's a big opportunity for growth there. If he does have an AL Rookie of the Year type campaign, you're going to get a big boost at the second base position for sure. Not that it wasn't great last year, because there were some pieces that fit plug and play, but it's center field for me. Like there's no doubt center field is the big one. If they can get a 3 WAR season out of Parker Meadows, that's going to be a huge advantage. He might be worth more than 3 WAR, which I think really stands out. And then I think at the catcher position too, you complement Jake Rogers with Carson Kelly, who I think is only going to boost that total even more. And then on the bench, there's, your bench WAR is going to go up as well because you've just added more depth across the board. Riley Green can stay healthy. If Kerry Carpenter can stay healthy a little bit more, those are 2 guys that missed significant time last year. Those are huge areas of growth. And then let's not even start. And then that's not even counting the pitching staff. And the pitching staff, we're going to see a big increase.
I think for sure in the starters. I'm going to drop a few things on you that are kind of going to blow your mind. Okay, because I did some homework about last year's WAR, and you almost won't believe some of the things I'll tell you. So how about last year? The biggest WAR position on the Detroit Tigers. They got the most productivity of any position was center field. They were 4.1 WAR in center field last year.
Really?
Hard to believe. But you got to understand that's where Riley Green played. It's where Parker Meadows got 1 WAR in, 30 games. And actually, Matt Vierling contributed to that. So that was their most productive place on the field. Now, here's what you need to understand is that left field, they amassed 0.8 WAR. So if we're going to trade left field and center field, because now Riley is going to play predominantly left field and some right field against left-handed pitching, now you got a guy that could be a 3 to 4 WAR player playing left field, where they got almost no WAR, and Meadows can still be a 2.8 to 3.8 WAR player if he plays really well in center. And they generate a lot more WAR. In addition to that, in right field, they were 1.3 aggregate WAR. And, between Carpenter and Canna, they should be able to easily exceed that number. Okay. Lastly, the other place where they were horrendous last year from a WAR standpoint was DH. They were a minus 1.2 WAR. They were 29th in homers, 30th in RBI, and 30th in ISO at the DH spot. So what's your thoughts now, knowing that probably Canna and Carpenter are splitting the DH spot? They got to be better than they were last year, right?
Canna, Carpenter, but also, too, Spencer Torkelson. When he needs a day off his feet, they're going to slide him in the DH spot, get him off his feet. Maybe Canna will play a little bit of first base, or Ibanez will play first base, or who knows how that's all going to work, but they do have some options there. Riley Green, we're going to see him play DH a little bit. Like, there are going to be some moving pieces. It's very easy to forget about Miguel Cabrera in the DH spot last season and how much that really sunk the Tigers. Like, as great as Miguel Cabrera is, baseball icon, one of the greatest to ever do it, Hall of Famer, but it was a really tough season last year when you look at his production compared to the average DH, right? Like league average, right? And even above league average, what it could possibly be. So getting that DH spot open is going to be huge for the Tigers this year. That's going to be a huge advantage, Mark. That could really do some things and open some things up, both for the offense's overall production, but also for the chess match that we talk about that AJ Hinch loves. He's going to be able to do a lot of different things, maneuver his lineup differently than he has in years past because that DH spot is now wide open.
Now, let's not leave out the fact that third base was a minus 1 WAR, a minus 23 defensive runs saved. I think they could put a garbage can out there and paint a face on it and probably do better than that this year, right?
Well, Gio Urshela is going to be better than that. The combination of him and Matt Vierling and Andy Ibanez and Zach McKinstry. Now, again, I want to reiterate something as well. Those at-bats have not yet been distributed. Those at-bats are going to have to be battled for from each of those players. So we've talked about it. I'm all on board with Gio Urshela getting the first crack at getting the majority of those bats against right-handed pitchers. But if he's not driving the ball, and again, we saw him on Sunday drive a ball, to right center field that I thought was a beautiful swing, over 100-mile-an-hour exit velocity, one hop the wall. It was the best swing that I've seen from him so far this spring. So I have some reason to be encouraged that Gio Urshela is going to be able to manage and get back to driving the ball like he used to before he had the broken pelvis. But if he doesn't hit against right-handed pitchers and he's not driving the ball, and if the new normal is a light-hitting singles guy, that might not last very long, and he might move into more of a bench role where Matt Vierling then slides and becomes more of the primary type third baseman, or at least gets the opportunity at those reps. And if Matt Vierling doesn't get the job done, then Zach McKinstry might be third in line for those opportunities. I think AJ Hinch knows how he likes to use Andy Ibanez. I'm not sure about Andy Ibanez and the arm strength there, but the point is there are a lot of options at third base. I do think Gio Urshela truly does move the needle, but it's going to really be about, can this guy get back to driving the ball? Is he going to have that doubles power to the gaps? If so, things are going to be good because he knows how to play defense at that hot corner. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, let's not sleep on Jace Young once it gets past June 1st either. So you just never know how things work out.
We never know, but give the kid time, but you never know.
I agree. All right, so real quickly before we get out of here, let's go through 3 fast things. Offensive team MVP. Who?
Cole Keith. Yeah, I think he's that good.
I'm going to go Riley Green because let's be real honest. Tigers are going nowhere without Riley Green doing some serious damage. So it's about time Riley Green did what he's supposed to do instead of always feeling like we're a day late and a dollar short there and it's kind of good. No more kind of good. It's time to be actual good. All right, the rotation team MVP.
Tarek Skubal, of course, 2024 American League Cy Young candidate. No doubt about it.
I don't think we can argue that one. All right, bullpen team MVP, but really, that's like saying who's going to be the closer.
I love Jason Foley. I think that Jason Foley is probably the best reliever in that bullpen right now. But I'm going to throw out a sneaky pick, and I'm going to say Shelby Miller. I like the stuff. I think it's nasty. I don't know if he knows where it's going sometimes, which can be a little bit of an issue, as we've seen with closers of past, like literally for the past 3 years, closers who didn't really know where the ball is going. Shelby Miller, though, if the command is locked in, Shelby Miller can be really good. He can be nasty. He can be a closer for you as long as he's commanding his pitches. So He's my dark horse bullpen team MVP, but Jason Foley, I think you're really good.
I think Foley starts as closer. I think when it comes to Alex Lang, we need to keep our eye on him because I think one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to be really, really, really good, take back the closer job and be really, really good, or he's going to end up in Toledo. It's going to be one or the other. All right, well, season starts on Thursday. We got 162 games. We got a lot of fun to have. We got a lot of baseball to talk about. I'm so glad that the spring training is almost over for Evan Petzold because what a grind it is. It's time for us to get out of here. So I'd like to remind everybody to rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. Of course, you can always find us at thefreep.com, embedded in every Evan Petzold article. I'd like to thank our executive producers, Kirk Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, Free Press editor Nicole Avery Nichols, and of course the man that always makes us sound good, Robin Chan. Love to my grandson, Savannah Petzold. Your husband is actually threatening to come home now, so I know that he's really, really excited about that. So shout out to Savannah Petzold, and let's get the baseball season started, people. Until next week. From a partner, Evan Petzold, I say peace.